Nigeria's Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edun, on Monday said President Tinubu inherited a bad economy with inflation at 24%. The minister was speaking to journalists after the inaugural Federal Executive Council meeting at the presidential villa in Abuja. However, the administration assured Nigerians that it would not rely on borrowing to raise funds to fix the country, while pledging to be transparent, honest, and accountable to the people. He noted that per capita had fallen steadily, inflation and unemployment are high, and the government is rebasing the way in which it's calculated. Let's turn now to an economist, Dr. Ifediora Amobi, to provide us with tips on how to rebuild Nigeria's ailing economy against the backdrop of the claim by the minister. Good afternoon, Dr. Amobi. Good to have you here on Arise News.
Good afternoon.
Yes, thank you for your time. Let's just start with the basics. That one of the newspapers today did state that the cost of governance is soaring with the appointments of SSAs, SAs, and PAs, and that is also depleting lean resources in very poor states. As an economist, how impactful do you see this on the Nigerian economy?
Oh, it has a very, very significant impact. The cost of governance, most especially when it comes to personnel, really digs quite deep into the pockets of government. Most elected officials or even appointed officials do not necessarily need all the assistants and advisors and senior positions that they actually have. Most of it is what Nigerians regard as jobs for the boys. There are lots of duplications and job overlaps which can be avoided. And if that is trimmed down to the barest minimum, it is really going to make a big impact on what government saves in areas of salaries and overheads and other expenses that it can budget for both at the federal and at the state levels. And so it is something that the government has to put its foot down and ensure that in these lean times of economic hardship, that is not encouraged.
All right, then in a situation where we have President Tinubu giving the directive to revive the economy at the inaugural Federal Executive Council with the roadmap for the economy being presented at this meeting, showing specific targets identified for the next 3 years. One of the key points mentioned was that the government would not rely on borrowing to raise funds. Now, when you look at this administration, how would you advise them to generate revenue and fund its economic revival plans without resorting to more borrowing?
Well, no government can do without borrowing unless you really have lots of excesses. Borrowing is not particularly a problem. It's what you do with the funds and how, the ability and capacity that you have to pay back when it is due. That is usually the issue, and that's why countries, default on their loans. But if we borrow for specific, projects that have returns, both monetary and non-monetary returns, then borrowing should be encouraged. However, we should always know when we reach a cap. Unfortunately, in the past administration, a lot of that had been done, and up till now, we still haven't even been able to get reports or even breakdowns of how the monies borrowed had been utilized, and even up to how much has even been borrowed. And so, the president has a point there, and the finance minister rightly said, yes, we will not resort to borrowing, but that doesn't necessarily mean that when it is necessary, borrowing should not be an option. There are other ways or other alternatives that the government can embark upon to try and revive the economy, one of which could be to focus more on the non-oil export sector, which the potential that, it has huge potential, but we are still focusing more on oil, like we've done over the years. And so a focus on the non-oil export, and I'm glad that in this administration, Mr. President has introduced, new areas like, the blue economy, etc. These are areas that if we focus on, and also including, creative industry, arts and culture, there is a lot of potential. There's so much that can be generated in that area if we do the right things. And so we can diversify away from our traditional crude oil revenue generating economy into even various value chains of agriculture, manufacturing, and like I mentioned before, creative economy, logistics, services. There are so many areas that opportunities abound at, and those can be areas of focus to grow the economy as alternatives to borrowing.
Well, Dr. Amobi, after all you highlighted, stating your excitement about the introduction of the blue economy and focusing on the creative industry, logistics and whatnot, I'm very curious to know your take on what a focus on tourism would also look like.
Oh, yeah. Tourism is also another area that we can focus on. However, we have to do a number of lay some foundations for tourism. Tourism depends on, one, security, and two, having things that you have put in place that can attract tourists to the country. Security is a key issue, or rather insecurity, as the case may be, is a big problem. It's still a big problem, and a lot of tourists and investors in particular are looking at the government to see what can be done to ensure that not only lives are protected, but also their investments, their financial investments, their property, etc., is protected. And so if we're able to reassure them and give them that comfort that coming into Nigeria or into certain parts of Nigeria will be safe and they can, come in, then we can actually encourage tourism and really go all out and compete with other economies, most especially around the sub-region, that are attracting tourists because they have that security in place.
Dr. Amobi, a very interesting point you made. I mean, I understand the argument for insecurity, making sure that lives and property are secure before you can even think about tourism. But there's also the argument about even the places that are safe. For example, like Lagos State. How much have we done to even push what we already have? But let's focus on my next question. Now, given the economic challenges and the need for a turnaround, job creation has now become a top priority with a now set goal of creating 50 million jobs, I believe, in 3 years. Now, what sectors of the economy, I know we've spoken about tourism, you've also mentioned blue economy, but what sectors should be targeted for job growth? And what strategies do you believe this current administration should consider in trying to achieve this ambitious goal of 50 million jobs?
Thank you. Well, one of the things that we're actually transiting into now is a change in demographics. If you recall, a lot of our the younger population in Nigeria today are now shifting from the traditional 9-to-5 jobs after graduation to areas that they can actually do things on their own. They are moving into this creative industry. They are now becoming more involved in digital and information technology. Those are areas that are growing worldwide. And these are some of the key areas that if the government focuses on and encourages, like fintechs and startups and innovation hubs and places like that, we will be able to move a lot of our unemployed youths into these areas because they have a passion for it already. in addition to supporting the traditional sectors like agriculture and manufacturing, construction, etc., I think it should be more focused in these new areas. And that's why I said I'm actually glad and encouraged that this administration is focusing on and has ministries dedicated to these new areas that have massive potential. So this is actually where I think government should start. They are low-hanging fruits. The traditional sectors, we can work on that as time goes on.
Well said, Dr. Amobi. I read this article, this write-up by Abejide Olusegun. He, did some analysis like you did, and he mentioned that the areas that need to be focused on are quality agricultural farming and market system, quality health system, education, enhancing electricity infrastructure, and reviving once thriving industries, as well as tackling corruption and mismanagement. Can you compare that to what you've actually mentioned? Which would you say should take precedence in based on what I just outlined?
Well, from what you outlined, there are some of those areas that can be tackled in a very, very short term. And so I think the first thing to do would be to prioritize based on which ones can we take care of right now, which ones can we now work in the medium term and then in the long term. Those are all crucial areas. And in addition to that, we have things like logistics, etc. Even supporting SMEs, because you also have a very vast pool of our younger population who want to become entrepreneurs, who want to start their own business, who have their own dreams and their own aspirations. And so, support should also come through the MSME programs and agencies across the country to ensure that segment of the population is also captured and taken care of. And so, it's a vast, array of sectors and subsectors that, from what you listed, from the ones I had identified earlier, and if we even had time to think through, we'll even add more to the list. Because Nigeria, with a population of almost 200 million, or even 200 million and above, the potential is limitless. The areas of which people have interest in are enormous. And so anywhere we can take somebody off the street and get them engaged one way or the other, or even have them employ others. Because one thing is saying that we have, let's say, for instance, 40 million unemployed youths, for instance. You can't create 40 million jobs. You can create a number of jobs that those ones can now employ and the other ones cannot employ. So it becomes almost like a pyramid or, a job creation chain whereby one, you employ one, that one employs 5, the 5 employ 10, 10 employ 100, and that's way, in a short time, we can tackle, at least eliminate our unemployment youths, within a short to medium time.
Okay, as we begin to wrap up, Doctor, now the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, I believe on the 24th of this month, released a report that pegged unemployment rate at 4.1% in the first quarter of 2023 and 5.3% in the previous quarter. The new figure, of course, is showing a difference of about 29.2% from the unemployment rate of 33.3% announced in 2020. And the reason behind this, they say, is the new methodology introduced by the International Labour Organization that aligns with global best practices. I want to know what your thoughts are on this new development from the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics.
Well, just like every other Nigerian, our first reaction was to have a good laugh when those figures were released, because they were not realistic. As a matter of fact, that methodology even needs to be scrutinized. If there's a new methodology, what you do is you run it through academia, think tanks, research institutions, and let them scrutinize them. You don't just take a new methodology, apply it, and then announce it. And then all of a sudden you go from, 30 or so percent, or almost 30% unemployment, to 4%. And so, it wasn't done the right way, and it shouldn't have been announced that way. I know it makes the figures and makes the government look good, but in reality, we all live in this economy, and we know what the unemployment situation is like. So if a new methodology redefines those who are unemployed, and I think it said something like that even if you work 1 hour a day, or even if you just go to work 1 day a week, you are employed, that in itself should be questioned, because one thing is actually being employed, another thing is not being able to even afford your basic needs. So you're actually not any better off than the person who is unemployed. And so we need to actually go back, look at that methodology, scrutinize it, revise it, and then come up with a more realistic unemployment figure, because what was published, as far as I'm concerned, was almost an insult to every Nigerian, or anybody who cares about Nigeria and Nigeria's economy.
An insult sounds just about right. Economist Dr. Ifediora Amobi, it's been a pleasure having you here on Newsday. Thank you for your time and insight. We appreciate you. Thank you.